Welcome back, everybody. It's James and Rick. We're back at the Pack Rat, and this week's topic that we're going to cover as part of our Gearing Up for the Backcountry series is water. So I'll probably get thirsty while we're talking about this. Just the suggestion of it is making me thirsty. But Rick, we're getting deeper in the backcountry this year, and we either have to carry water on our backs or we have to deal with water that we find and make it safe to drink.
Yep.
And so there's probably as many ways to do that as there are ways to skin a cat.
There are a lot of ways. Water, it's important for a lot of reasons, right? We're out there hunting. If we're putting a lot of miles in, it's important that we stay hydrated. But the sort of caveat or the flip side of that is what's the heaviest thing you could carry in your pack? It's water.
8 pounds a gallon.
Right. Why is meat so heavy? Because it's made with a lot of water, right? That's why we dry it into jerky so we can carry that in our pack. So it's a tricky situation. We need to take care of our water needs carefully. We're all different. We all have different needs, and we need to ask ourselves some questions in order to decide or make good decisions about what type of water system that would make sense for us to carry in the backcountry.
Yep.
There's everything from physical filters to chemicals to UV light pens. There are a number of different ways to treat water, or you could carry your water in and out. And if it's a short day hike trip, that might be appropriate. You could put a couple of Nalgene bottles in your backpack, carry that in for your day hike, especially in cooler weather, and you might be okay. But if you're going to be backpacking in or going in warmer weather or something like that, it makes a lot of sense to have a way to take water from the environment and be able to clean it and make it safe to drink.
Well, and this is something that I kind of enjoy while I'm out around. You might find a spring,
right,
that the water looks fantastic.
Yeah.
And it's cool, usually coming out of the ground, and maybe the water in my bottle is a little warm. Obviously, I don't think we need to go through all the things that you can do to yourself by drinking water that's not treated.
Sure.
But you can put a world of hurt on yourself just by taking some of that cool water and drinking it.
You can. Unfortunately, the world in more than one way is complicated nowadays. And without getting too far off the sidetrack there, it's not just as simple as maybe it once was to walk up to a stream or a spring coming out of the ground. It's like, oh, well, the ground's filtering. It's fine. But, without getting too much of like a science teacher here, especially in the Ozarks, we have what's called karst topography. And so we have limestone and sandstone everywhere. And what happens is that if so-and-so drops something or dumps something on the ground and it leaches, it doesn't just go straight down. It drops into the water table and it spreads out everywhere. So that contaminant could show up miles away from where it was originally introduced. And it could very well be out of the spring that you were drinking out of, that you thought it was fine. And it turns out there's a bunch of chicken manure waste or something like that, right? That's in there. And so even though it looks clear and safe to drink, in my opinion, it isn't worth, risking your health over. I would highly recommend treating the water. And so here we've got some examples of different ways to do that. And basically, we just want to narrow things down so that, you have a few questions you can ask yourself to help narrow down what might be an appropriate solution to treating your water.
Yep. Yeah. So why don't we start here, Rick, and let's just say, and this is, I will use myself as a good example here. I've got a steri pen, which I bought when I went to Alaska a few years ago. And in that situation, that made a lot of sense. There's plentiful water. Mm-hmm. I could scoop it up, treat it with the pen. I wasn't too worried about anything else going on with that. But aside from that, I don't know much else about treating water. So I'm going to go somewhere and I need to know how do I pick between all these different things?
If you go and Google, water filters. I mean, there's like 100 on the market nowadays.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, what makes brand X better than brand Y or vice versa? One of the first things that I want to do just really quickly is talk about the difference between a water filter and a water purifier. Okay? A water purifier, or if the action of purifying water is going to yield a higher level of treatment to that water than just filtering it.
Okay.
And when we talk about filtering it, the pore size of the actual filter, like for instance, we'll use the Sawyer Mini as an example here. This is a $25 filter, probably one of the most popular filters on the market nowadays, and it's a very good filter. But because it's a filter, it's going to reduce large microbes, basically, organic matter out of the water system, like 99.999%. And so when I say large, what I'm talking about are bacteria and protozoans for the most part. Those are things like Giardia is a very common one that people hear about, that they're worried about, is this going to take care of it? Filtration units are appropriate. But where we get into kind of tricky terrain are in two other places. One of them are viruses. Viruses are orders of magnitude smaller than bacteria, right? And they'll slip right through the pores of the filter. Okay. So filters are not appropriate enough on their own in order to treat your water for viruses. It's like, well, do we have to worry about that? Well, it depends. Like, what's your water source? Where are you getting your water from? And how concerned are you about the level of filtration that you're getting? If you're going into a wilderness area that you would consider to be very clean, pristine type of conditions, most of us are going to be fine, in my opinion, with a filter of some sort. Okay. Because for the most part, if it's natural, you don't have man-made introduced contaminants, you're likely to be just fine. I've gone not only here in Arkansas, but all over the country using filtration units, and I've been just fine. Okay. Never had any issues. Where we start to worry about viruses is where we have where people get involved, and they start, using the bathroom into the water source, right?
It all runs downhill,
right? It all goes down the watershed. And so if that's a concern, and we may have, you're worried about it for whatever reason, you may want a higher level of purification. And I have two examples of purifiers up here as far as mechanical purification units. One is the Guardian, which is a very high level filtration unit. It's actually a self-cleaning unit from MSR. The reason it's not a cheap unit, the reason I bring it up though is because I've been in some places where I had to pump like skunky, muddy, silty pothole water, and this thing is self-cleaning, and I've had it pump when nothing else would. Okay. In like really nasty conditions. So for whatever reason, if you're in areas and you're worried about the quality of the water itself, like it's turbid and that type of stuff, then having something like that might make sense. One of my favorite ones personally, though, that I'll mention is the Grail. This works like a coffee press, and it takes the place of two pieces of gear. This is your water bottle, and it's a water purifier. Okay. And so it's a really nice unit because it fits just like an Nalgene bottle, side of your pack, wherever you want to put it. But when you pull it apart, you take the one, you scoop this into the creek, and you put this back on top, and you press it down just like a French press. Okay. I can drink that water as fast as I just did that. Wow. It's incredibly fast. There's no wait times like with light or chemicals or anything like that. And not only that, but it does have a carbon element inside. So if you happen to be in areas that may be adjacent to like agricultural fields or something like that, and you're concerned about pesticide runoff, herbicide, things like that, it's actually going to help to remove heavy metals much better than anything that's just filtering water. Okay. So something to be aware of. So I know that was a lot on those two, and differences between filtration and purification. But I think it's important to know so that you don't think you're getting a product that does one thing, but in reality, it's only doing something else.
Yeah, I mean, you can make yourself pretty sick by not understanding this component of your kit.
For sure.
Okay, so what you've just talked about are some good solutions there, varying levels. I mean, if I'm just going out for a day hike, I'm probably not going to bring the Guardian unless I'm not going to take my water and I'm worried about drinking out of a mud hole.
Right. This one's like the one for like the long term. A lot of people for like emergency preparedness and things like that, long term situations. That's really where the Guardian, kind of comes in nice.
Yep. Okay.
So kind of set that one aside. This is, again, one of my favorites. It's my go-to all around. Everything from day hike to multi-day backpacking trips. I'm just such a huge fan of the Grail. But it is still a little big. It's still a little heavy in comparison to other ones. And so I want to talk about some of these smaller units that are out here. We already mentioned the Sawyer unit. It is just a filter, but it works really well. It's fast. It can be used in a lot of different ways. You can fill a bag, squeeze it, and then fill other containers with this. You can also use it inline with a hydration bladder.
Right. So
if you like using a Camelback or something like that, you can actually put it in the line that's the hose you drink out of, and then as you drink, you're filtering the water.
Okay.
And so that works pretty well. But I wanted to talk about a couple of other products as well. One of them is kind of an old school, and it's been around for many years, but a lot of people have had good results with this, and this is Potable Aqua. They're chlorine dioxide tablets, and these are the ones where, like this box, for instance, will treat 20 quarts. And so you take your Nalgene bottle, unscrew it, throw one tablet in, screw it back down, you wait for an hour, and for the most part, your water is going to be purified, good to drink. Now, it isn't going to remove any heavy metals or do anything as far as that goes. And there are some pathogens. There's a bug, a particularly nasty one called Cryptosporidium. Yep. And that one in particular is somewhat resilient to some of the chemicals that are out there. You have to have longer wait times. It's not something that you need to be scared of. It's not particularly common, but if you have heard of an area having that or something like that, or if you're doing your research and you hear about that one, I would probably want to filter my water in addition to using a chemical just to be safe.
Okay.
If you've got something like that. This one, though, is a product that I really want to call out because not a lot of people know about this. Okay. It's underutilized, in my opinion, and it can be used alone or in conjunction with another filtration unit like a Sawyer. And this is a product called Purinize, and it's a liquid. It's not a tablet. And I really like this for a lot of reasons. One is that it is not a chemical. So unlike chlorine dioxide or iodine or something like that, or I've even heard people use bleach, right, and stuff like that, which don't recommend personally. But I guess it's maybe better than drinking. You got
to weigh your options,
right? But some really bad water. But I like this because it's a non-chemical. It's actually made from mineral salts, and it's a natural electrolyte. So already it's good for you because you're introducing electrolytes back into your system. But it purifies water, and it does it in a couple of different ways. One is through coagulation, so it causes impurities to connect, and then they settle out of the water column, and they fall to the bottom. And then you can either pour off the water on the top, or you can pour it through like a coffee filter or something like that. And those larger coagulated impurities will be caught through that. The other thing that it does kind of on a molecular level is it actually causes an ion exchange with the contaminants, and it basically makes those things inert, and it makes it safe to drink. I've been using this for a couple of years now. I've quit using every other type of tablet. Aquamira is another one out there that's on the market. It is a good product. I used it for years, but this Purinize product is awesome. If you go to a place where you're like, oh, I love my Sawyer, it works great, or whatever filter that you like to use, but I think I may need to bump it up a little bit better. I want a higher level to get rid of viruses. If you add these two together, then you're good. You've covered all your bases.
Okay.
So you can combine two different kinds of products. And, again, $25 filter, and I forget what these run, maybe $10-15 or something like that. Okay. So for not a crazy amount of money or anything, you have a really solid system that's going to take care of your water needs for a lot of different scenarios.
Gotcha.
So.
And that's all pretty. Has a small footprint.
Yeah, I mean,
pretty simple to use.
These are almost the same size. I mean, the filter, the Sawyer filter, one of the reasons people love it is because it's so small.
Right.
It weighs like 2 or 3 ounces. It takes up hardly any room. The nice thing about all of the filters, though, is you can drink the water as fast as you filter it. With any of, like, even the Pure Nice, even though it's not a chemical or any of the other chemical ones, there's always a wait time involved. Mm-hmm. And so you have to, anywhere there's a pro, there's a con somewhere else.
Yep.
You know, it either is super, it's going to do everything for you, but it's heavy and expensive. Or it, is super lightweight, but you got a wait time. And so there's always, something going on. Yep. And there's, live straw, and this is another one. This is actually made by Aquamira. This is a filtration emergency straw. I like to keep a straw in my first aid kit a lot of times because it's that like last ditch thing. It's like got stuck somewhere, didn't expect to be there. And the Pure Nice or the tablets can actually work really well for the same thing. It's that like, oh man, this kind of sucks. I didn't expect to be here. It's always good to have a backup. And for as lightweight and inexpensive as these items are here, it makes a whole lot of sense to keep something handy. I've been on hikes before where like maybe I had a filter, but it turns out that I didn't know it at the time, but no one else remembered to bring one. And especially now, this day and age, sharing bottles and filters is not ideal. And so it makes a lot of sense sometimes too with something like this because I can put drops in everyone's container, never touch it, and we've stayed as sanitary as we can and that sort of thing. So I think there's a lot of pros to working with something like that. And then, of course, like James said, he brought the SteriPen. Still a very viable option. UV light does a really good job of killing contaminants in the water. Again, you need to make sure you use it according to the directions. Yep. The one downside to it, I guess,
gotta have batteries.
You gotta have batteries, and it treats relatively small volumes of water.
That's right.
Once, right.
I think that one does a liter. At the max.
So you just need to be aware that you're gonna do. You need to follow those directions, and you're only going to be treating that amount of water each time before you do it. One other one that we didn't bring out here are gravity systems. And again, to go back to something like this, Katadyn makes them, MSR makes them, Sawyer makes them. But there are a lot of filtration systems on the market where you can take a big bag, go to the creek, scoop it up, hang it, and then gravity just flows right down. And then when you come back 10 minutes later, you've maybe got 2 or 3 liters of clean water that's ready to be used.
Yep. Okay.
And I guess the final thing I'll mention that we haven't talked about at all that's still an important and viable option is boiling. Right?
You got your fire kit in your pack, right?
Right. If you can make a campfire, boiling is still, even amongst all this technology that we've got out here, very viable option. And you'll notice that none of these filters or purifiers we have out here, the physical or mechanical ones, are going to say 100% of all pathogens. Boiling's really still the only thing that can do 100%. But if I'm thirsty, do I want to stop and make a fire to get my stove out and boil water to let that water cool to the point where I can drink it? So once again, boiling's great. And if you're in the camp situation, like if it's time for me to cook a dehydrated meal or something like that, I'm not going to waste a resource here or even here because I'm boiling that water. If I've got nice, cool stream water and I can just take my pot and dip it in there and boil that water, then why waste your filtration source? I'm just going to boil the water, but, make sure it boils. Bring it to a good rolling boil. And then
how long do you need to boil it?
Yeah, so that's a great question, too. We get that a lot. And how long you need to boil it has a lot to do with altitude.
Okay.
And the reason is because water will boil at different temperatures as you go up at altitude. So if you're 5,000 feet or under, a good rule of thumb is bring it to a good rolling boil, and then at that point you should be okay.
All right.
For every 5,000 feet that you go above it,
okay,
add about 5 minutes.
Okay.
So if you're
that's significant. Then.
Yeah, it's pretty significant. So, and again, this is leaning on the safe side.
Yep.
Does that mean at 10,000 feet you need to boil your water extra 5 minutes every time? I'm not going to carry a chemistry kit with me to figure it out while I'm up there. I just want to be safe and make sure that I'm good. And again, the reason is because since water boils at a lower temperature at a higher altitude, I'm no longer bringing the temperature up of the water to 212 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, instead of boiling it, it's more of a pasteurization situation. And pasteurization takes longer periods of time in order to kill those pathogens. So when in doubt, but you have to factor all that in. I mean, if you're using gas, from a canister for a stove, and you're boiling water for longer periods of time, you're really going to chew through your fuel. So maybe now it doesn't make sense to boil my water if I'm at 13,000 feet in Colorado and a mule deer hunt or something like that. Like maybe now I need to go ahead and treat it with this so that all I have to do is get my water nice and hot so that I can pour it and rehydrate my meal or whatever it is that I'm taking. So again, you've got to just ask yourself, like, what is the scenario I'm in, and what are the best decisions I can make to make the most use of the resources that I have and look after myself as best I can.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense. So I think to wrap everything up, Rick, things that people need to think about: how big is your group?
Yep.
Where are you going? Like, you need to have some idea. Are you going to be next to something polluted, or what kind of things do you need to worry about?
Definitely.
And then how much water do I need to be able to treat at a given time? Does that kind of boil it down? Use a term we were just talking about.
No pun intended, right? Yeah. I think those are really good questions to ask yourself before you make a decision. And again, knowing that just like there's no one gun or bow you can buy that does every single type of hunting you might ever do. There's no one filter that you're going to buy that's going to cover you potentially, if you do enough stuff or if you have enough variety in the places you go. And so that's why it's good to, arm yourself with a little bit of knowledge about these different tools, and also know, kind of more traditional and primitive methods as a backup. So in case, you do get into trouble, you're able to, look after yourself if you happen to run out of, whatever or it just fails on you. Another point real quick I'll mention, and this could go on forever, but if you're carrying any type of physical filter like these, one thing you have to be really mindful of is it freezing on you.
Oh, yeah.
I've definitely been in winter conditions before where we were pumping water and they froze solid on us.
Ugh.
Not only do they not work anymore, but if they freeze hard enough, it could crack the filtration element and render it ineffective.
Useless.
And there's really no way to know. So if you're even more reason to consider taking, a chemical or something like the Pure Nice. However, there's definitely things you can do to deal with that. And the number one thing is that you need to put it in your sleeping bag at night. If you're camping in a situation, most of the time, not always, but most of the time, it's coldest at night, right? So if we get to camp and it's cold, one thing that we can do is if we've got a package that we can put everything, plastic bag, whatever it may be, if we're wearing a down jacket or something like that, and we're worried about it, just put it inside a big pocket inside our down jacket. Okay. You don't have to keep it warm. You just need to keep it from freezing, right? So just bring that up. And then same thing at night, shove it in the bottom of my sleeping bag, and I just need to try to do what I can to keep it from freezing. And then hopefully the next day, a lot of times, even if it's 20 at night, it may warm up to 40, the next day. Yeah. But just be aware of the limitations of cold weather on your equipment. And because as far as filtration and purification units, it can be a big problem.
Yeah. There's a lot to think about. And this is an area where, what is the rule of threes? You can go 3 minutes without air. You can go 3 days without water. you'd hate to make a mistake on something like this and dehydrate yourself or make yourself sick. So it's worth it to spend some time on it. Just like we talked about with boots, maybe check someplace out that you can speak to somebody who's got some experience in that if you don't have some experience, and understand what you're going to be comfortable with. I'd just like to close by saying make sure whatever you buy that you get comfortable and understand how it works.
Couldn't agree more.
I carry the instructions for my SteriPen with me just in case. I could be in a situation where I can't remember how long or which button or it's not doing stuff.
The place to learn how to use this is not, on day one of your 4-day backpacking trip, right?
That's right.
You should have already gone through the paces in your backyard on a short day hike, in a local place, and worked out all the kinks so that, when you really need it and are going to depend on it, you don't have these problems that may unexpectedly pop up that, may be solved easily, but maybe not.
That's right. Well, and you need to know how to solve them too.
Right.
That's the most important thing. You can do a lot of things for yourself in the backcountry if you just have a little bit of knowledge. Practicing on the front side of that will definitely help get you there.
No doubt.
So we're going to wrap up this video. Just encourage you to get out, get a little bit more experience out in the backcountry. Give some of these products a try. Do a little bit of your own research for sure, but don't be afraid of giving some things a try and getting out there and going a little farther. So till next time, I'm James. That's Rick. We'll see you later.